Good evening and welcome to Shavuot. So beautiful and so exciting to understand the Feast of Shavuot. And I pray that after we're done, you'll be able to say, I am going to do Shavuot from this point on all the days of my life. So let's take a look at Shavuot. What is it? Passover, PESAJ. In order to understand Shavuot, we are going to start looking at Passover, PESAJ, because that's the beginning. Actually, is directly linked to the Passover. It's a feast, not really two feasts or three feasts. It's a feast. One begins in Nisan and it ends in Sivan. The word Shavuot means weeks, and Shavuot's feast marked the culmination of the 7-week account between Passover and Shavuot. It's one of the few known holidays among secular Jews in the Jewish diaspora, while in Israel they are more aware of it. According to Jewish law, Shavuot is celebrated in Israel for 1 day and in the diaspora or outside of Israel for 2 days. Judaism celebrates only 1 day, even in the diaspora. For Christians, the name is Pentecost, Penta, 50, with the difference that they only focus in the coming of the Holy Spirit. All the rest of what Shavuot really means is totally ignored. But today, you're going to learn about Shavuot. It's got many names, by the way. Zeman Matan Toratenu, the day of the giving of the Torah. It commemorates the anniversary of the day that God gave Israel the Torah to the nation of Israel when they gathered in Mount Sinai. Shavuot is also the times for the fulfillment of the second series of stone tablets, with the difference that for Christianity, the law of the second tablets, the 10 Commandments, were written in the hearts of men. Hag HaShavuot means the Feast of Weeks. From the time the Jews left Egypt, they waited for 7 weeks and eagerly counted the days in anticipation of the day when they would be worthy of receiving the Torah. We count Sephirah for 7 weeks, starting from the night following the first day of Pesach, and then we celebrate the festival of Shavuot weeks. Got more names, Yom HaKippurim, and this one is very important, and we're going to really study this one. The festival of the harvest, Feast of Fertility. How come? Of course, Israel was born that day when was given the Torah. We, the believers in Messiah, were born on Shavuot, Pentecost. They also call the conclusion of Pesach. And finally, the name Kingdom. Kingdom. Why? Because King David was born that day. And guess what? His mom had a real special name, which was the mother of the kingdom, because she gave birth to King David. So, in Leviticus 23, 1-14, we see the month of ABIB. ABIB means springtime. And in Babylonian name is Nisan. They are these, and he says, these are the appointed times of the Lord, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at the times appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at twilight, is the Lord's Passover. Everything happens at twilight. But it's the Lord's Passover. What does that mean? That means the Lamb, 14th of Nisan. Then, on the 15th day of the same month, there's the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Lord. To the Lord. Not to the Jews, to the Lord. Whatever we do to the Lord. And he is asking appointed times of the Lord. So who else is going to give us commandments? Who else is going to tell us what to do? The Lord. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. But for 7 days you shall present an offering by fire to the Lord. On the seventh day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. In other words, 14th of Nisan, we have the lamb. On the 15th of Nisan, or Abib, then we have the beginning of unleavened bread, which is really compared in the scriptures with sin. Leaven equals sin. Just like when you cook a bread, and the bread gets real big. The same thing with sin. So, on the 15th and then on the 21st is the last day of unleavened bread. On the 15th is a holy convocation, and on the 21st is a holy convocation. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, When you enter the land which I'm going to give to you, and you gather its harvest, then you shall bring in the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. Now, this is the first harvest. And the first harvest, it is not wheat, it is barley. Everything that has to do with Israel, Israel is barley. The nation is wheat. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord for you to be accepted. In other words, if you don't bring the barley and you don't bring the sheaf, you're not going to be accepted, Israel. Then he says, on the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. There's a lot of problems in this little sentence, the day after the Sabbath. Two different organizations. You have the Sadducees and you have the Pharisees. Constant fights between both of them. You know, what is he talking about? Because the first day of unleavened bread is a Sabbath. So we start counting from there. But then the other one says, oh no, it's supposed to be counting after the regular Sabbath. So who's right? Guess what? Yeshua. Why? Matthew 28, 1 through 7 says, Now after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the tomb. Behold, a severe earthquake had occurred, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat upon him. And his appearance was like lightning, and his clothing as white as snow. The guards shook from fear of him and became like dead men. And the angel said to the woman, Do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Yeshua, who has been crucified. He's not here, for he has risen. Just as he said, Come, see the place where he was lying, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you. So, wow. So what is this? We are going back, not going forward, going back. We see the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest. In other words, the sheaf of the first fruits of barley. But a sheaf is more than one. I believe so. So let's take a look at what is he talking about. Number one, he comes out of the tomb the Sabbath after the Sabbath, beginning to dawn toward the first day of the week. This is what I go by. I don't go by the Sadducees or the Pharisees. I go back by Yeshua. Yeshua resurrected, and he was the first one of resurrect that day. And it was a Sunday. So let's take a look at the next one. That's a sheaf of barley. But now, wait a minute. A sheaf of barley is more than one? Well, let's go back to Leviticus 23 again. It says, He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord for you to be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Wow. But how is that possible? Yeshua is only one. How come there's many? It's a sheaf. Well, here's the answer. In Matthew 27, 50, 54, it says, And Yeshua cried out again with a loud voice and gave up his spirit. You know, let me tell you, he died because he said so. He did not die like any other man. He yelled. And after he yelled, he told the spirit to get out of his body. And that's what he did. And he says, and behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. Also, oh my God, look at this. Also the tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Now we understand. It is a sheaf. It is a bunch. How many of them got up? But then it gets better. He says, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection. Number one, he had to resurrect first. So he resurrects. All the tombs open up, but they wait. They don't come out of the tomb until he resurrects. And then he says, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they enter the holy city and appear to many. Now, as for the centurion and those who were with him keeping guard over Jesus, when they saw the earthquake and the other things that were happening, they became extremely frightened and said, truly, this was the Son of God. You see, he and those that came out of the tombs made up a sheaf of barley, because this was all Israel. So it begins here. Then right after that, Sunday, then we're going to start counting. Leviticus 23, 15 to 16. You shall also count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day when you brought in the sheaf of the wave offering. Woo! How many they come up from the tomb? Who knows? I don't know. But could you imagine being in Jerusalem and one of those that you know they're dead come up and say, hi there, he has risen. Then he says, there shall be 7 complete Sabbaths. You shall count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall present a new grain offering to the Lord. Why on Sunday? Because Sunday is the beginning of everything. When the creation was taking place, you started on Sunday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbat, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Monday is always the first day of the week and the beginning of everything new. Then he says, you shall bring in from your dwelling places 2 loaves of bread as a wave offering, made of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of a fine flour, baked with leaven, as first fruits to the Lord. So now we got 2 loaves. So we start counting after that, as after the Saturday, beginning with Sunday, first day of the week, we start counting Sabbaths. How many Sabbaths? 7 Sabbaths. Then after those 7 Sabbaths, they bring in 2 loaves. You have to bring the 2 loaves first. If you don't bring the 2 loaves first, then it will not be received. So let's keep on reading. Then he says, along with the bread, you shall present 7. Oh, forgot to say, this is leaven. Leaven. If it represents the nations, this is leaven. Leaven bread, not unleavened. Leavened bread. Along with the bread you shall present 7 one-year-old male lambs without defect, and a bull of the herd and 2 rams. They are to be burnt offerings to the Lord, with the grain offering and the drink offerings. You shall also offer 1 male goat as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs 1 year old as a sacrifice of peace offerings. Shavuot is celebrated 7 whole weeks after the elevation of the Omer, or the first fruits of barley. Was also the festival of the first new harvest and the time of the new wheat offering. So, it's also called Yom HaBikurim, and we say we're going to look into Bikurim. Bikur is one, Bikurim, im at the end of the word, means many. So therefore we have Shtecha Lechem, which means 2 breads. Why 2 breads? Well, if we remember, Israel was divided into 2 nations. During the times of Solomon, kingdom of the north, the kingdom of the south, and finally the kingdom of the north was taken out and sent into the nations, where they are until really today. How many have they married, and how many have they traveled all over the world? You don't know, but you know that the 10 tribes are in the nation. But then the bottom, or the southern kingdom, was what? Judah and Benjamin, which stay, and of course the priesthood. Some of the priesthood stayed also there. That is also taken out to Babylon later on during Nebuchadnezzar. So we have 2 nations. Now, today we can say is that Israel, Moshe, and those in Israel and those in the nations. Because in the nations, you also have part of Israel. So the priest shall then wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering with 2 lambs before the Lord, to be holy to the Lord for the priest. So 2 lambs, 2 nations. After the bread were offered, then it was allowed to bring offerings of wheat to the temple, and from the fresh harvested wheat and barley. Also, Shavuot means promises. Why? Because the Lord delivered the Torah to the Jewish people. They promised to obey it and remain faithful to Him. In return, the Lord promised that they would be His people. I'll be your God. You be my people. You belong to Him. So these 2 breads, we can say they're bikurim, first fruits, because they were the first of all the wheat harvest offerings. The harvest season for barley is in Nisan or Abib. The harvest season for wheat is in Sivan, 50 days later. Barley is the first fruits of Israel. Wheat is the first fruits of the nations. Now, this is what's interesting. The wheat could not be reaped until they had presented the 2 leavened breads to the Lord in the temple. Meaning, the 2 breads had to be finished, had to be cooked, and then presented in order to reap the wheat harvest. Paul said something different, a little different, but it kind of has the same sense and means, and this way he says, Paul in Romans 11, he says, and in this way all Israel will be saved. In other words, not until it's all finished, all cooked, all presented, all the breads are together. Time cannot end. It can end only when everything is done. So, the annual fruit presentation ceremony for Shavuot, and this they have to bring also. In Deuteronomy 26 says, then it shall be when you enter the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, and you take possession of it and live in it, then you shall take some of the first of all the produce of the ground which you bring in from your land that the Lord your God gives you. You shall put it in a basket. Go to the place where the Lord your God chooses to establish His name, and you shall go to the priest who's in the office at that time and say to him, I declare today to the Lord my God that I have entered the land which the Lord swore to our fathers to give us. Is an oath. So that's why this here feast is also an oath. It's something that you're saying, yes, I receive what you're giving me, and in return I'll give you the first fruits of all my works. So what did they bring? Wheat, barley, figs, grapes, dates, pomegranates, and olives. Those are the 7 most important fruits of the land. So, it's a human oath. Then the priest shall take the baskets from your hand and set it before the altar of the Lord your God. And you shall respond and say before the Lord your God, my father was a wandering Aramean, and he went down to Egypt and resided there. few in number. But there he became a great, mighty, and populous nation, and the Egyptians treated us badly and oppressed us and imposed hard labor on us. Then we cried out to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our wretched condition, our trouble, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and with great terror, and with signs and wonders. And he has brought us to this place, and has given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now behold, I have brought the first of the produce of the ground, which you, Lord, have given me. You know, nothing belongs to us. If you look at this here, it's really our lives. We, believers in Messiah, he took us out of Egypt. He has given us everything that we have. So, what we're supposed to do, bring the first fruits of our labors. Then you shall set it before the Lord your God, and worship before the Lord your God, and you, the Levite and the stranger who's among you, shall rejoice in all the good which the Lord your God has given you and your household. So, we have it, we enjoy it, and we thank him for what he has given us. And you make that commitment, which is an oath, it's a human oath to the Lord. From Abib to Sivan, remember, Abib is the lamb, Sivan is the wheat. From Pesach to Shavuot. Abib, springtime, first month of the year. 14th of Abib, the lamb. Second month of Iyar, counting of the Omer, every day, counting to get to 50. 15 days later, month of Sivan, Shavuot, Pentecost. But you know, it gets even more interesting because everybody thinks that this feast began with Moses. Oh yeah, Moses gave the people of Israel all the feast in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and all that. Nope. The Jubilee book is based on the solar priestly Sabbath calendar. 3rd century, 2nd century before Messiah, which was designed to have holidays and Sabbath days fall on the same day of the week every year. That's why I told you that Yeshua resurrected on the first day of the week, because he did use that calendar. So therefore, you cannot put the pieces together, because he did not use the regular calendar. He used this calendar. He used the solar Sabbath priest calendar of the book of Jubilees. In this calendar, better known as the Book of Luminaries, in First Enoch, Shavuot fell on the 15th of Sivan, on the 3rd month of the year, on Sunday. Shavuot is supposed to be always on Sunday. The date was counted 50 days from the first Saturday after Passover. Jubilee is considered canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, just like the Jews of Ethiopia, where it is known as the Book of the Division. He was well known by earthly Christians, as evidenced by the writings on Epiphanius, Justin Martyr, Origen, Diodoro of Tarso, Isidoro of Alexandria, Isidoro of Seville, Eutychius of Alexandria, and so on and so on. But, so let's take a look and see what is it that the Book of Jubilee teaches us about Shavuot. In Genesis 6, 1, 2, from the Book of Jubilees, it says, talking about Noah, it says, and on the new month of the 3rd month, Sivan, he went forth from the ark and built an altar on that mountain. In other words, the flood is over, and now on the 3rd month, he leaves the ark and makes an altar. And he made atonement for the earth, and took a kid and made atonement by its blood for all the guilt of the earth, for everything that had been on it had been destroyed, save those that were in the ark with Noah. In verses 15 to 17 says, And he gave, meaning God gave to Noah and his sons a sign that there should not again be a flood on the earth. He set his vow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. For this reason, now listen to this, it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year to renew the covenant every year. You see, when you do Shavuot, you're renewing also the covenant of Noah, the covenant at the beginning of creation, the covenant of Noah. And then we're going to see the rest. But it's incredible that this thing has just been completely taken out of the mind and the understanding of the believers. How can that be? So if we keep on reading, in 6 to 18 to 20, it says, and this whole festival, now listen, was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation. So Adam knew that feast until the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years, 1309 to 1659. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years. That means 350 years. Until the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. With this covenant, Noah and his family joined the ranks of angels. Why? They have been keeping the covenant since creation and were witness to the eternal continuity of the cyclical laws of nature. You see, everything from creation has been done through, is supposed to be done anyway, through the laws of creation. The numbers are set, the years are set, the days are set. Mankind has changed all that. It should now be clear why Noah, having concluded the covenant, received 7 commandments, which reverse the sins of the fallen angels that caused the flood. So let's take a look at it. Number 1, creation. Number 2, Adam, Noah. 7 precepts of Noah to the nations. Do not worship idols. Do not blaspheme. Do not commit sins of a sexual nature. Do not steal. Do not kill. Do not eat the meat of a live animal. Establish courts of justice to implement compliance with said laws. This is called Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, also known as 7 precepts of the nations, or the Noahide laws. Collection of laws that, according to rabbinic Judaism, were granted by God, that is, to all humanity. In detail, any non-Jew who adheres to these laws because of being revealed to Noah becomes a just Gentile and is assured a place in the world to come, the end reward of the just. Now, of course, when Yeshua comes in, things change. Now you have a gospel and you accept the gospel. Here is all this time through Noah, through Moses, and through the judges, and until the coming of the Messiah. So in Jubilee 6, we're going to see Abraham. And look at this, what Abraham observed it. And Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it up to your days. And in your days, the children of Israel forgot it until you celebrated anew on this mountain. It's God speaking to Moses. And you command the children of Israel to observe this festival in all their generations for a commandment unto them. One day in the year, in this month, they shall celebrate the festival. For it is the Feast of Weeks, and the feast of first fruits. This feast is twofold and of a double nature, according to what is written and engraved concerning it. Celebrate it. Are you going to celebrate it now? Double feast. For I have written in the book of the first Torah, in that which I have written for you, that you should celebrate it in its season, one day in a year. And I explain to you its sacrifices, that the children of Israel should remember and should celebrate it throughout their generations in this month, one day in every year. Then God said to Abram, now for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. God is speaking in Genesis 15, regular Bible. He's going to give him a covenant now. He's going to cut a covenant. He says, now bring me this and bring me this. All these animals, cut them up, and I'll come to see you. And he says, to your descendants, I have given this land from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. In verse 18, a little further up, it says, on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, and he gives him the land of all these people. That's why he tells Israel, when they walk into the land, get them out. They don't belong in there. My covenant is with you, and that is your land. Now, the second covenant, the covenant between the pieces, was made with Abraham again in the third month. The angels explain it, that it was like a renewal of the divine angelic covenant with Noah. In Jubilees 14, 8-20, it says, and on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your seed will I give this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenite, the Kenizzite, the Perizzite, the Rephaim, and all the ites. And the day passed, and Abram offered the pieces and the birds, and their fruit offerings, and their drink offerings, and the fire devoured them. Abraham, observing the covenant, celebrates the early wheat harvest in the middle of the third month, and offers a new sacrifice on the altar. What day was that? What month it was? The month of Sivan. Which day? It was a Sunday, first day of the week. Then he says, God tells him, he appears to him and orders him to circumcise himself and the men of his house as a sign that his progeny had been specially chosen, sanctified, and compared with the angels. At this time also, his name was changed to Abraham. Did you understand that when you do this and you keep this covenant and this feast, you will be celebrating with the angels in the heavens? Because in the heavens, the angels celebrate this feast every year. Jacob and Shavuot, Jubilees 44, 1-5. Israel set out from Hebron, from his house, on the first of the third month. Wow, where are we? Sivan. He went by way of the well of the oath and offered a sacrifice to the God of his father Isaac on the 7th of this month. When Jacob remembered the dream that he had seen in Bethel, he was afraid to go down to Egypt. But as he was thinking about sending word to Joseph that he should come to him and that he would not go down, he remained there for 7 days on the chance that he would see a vision, whether he should remain or go down. He celebrated the harvest festival, the first fruits of grain, with all grain, because in all the land of Canaan there was not even a handful of seed in the land, since the famine affected all the animals, the cattle, the birds, and mankind as well. On the 16th, the Lord appeared to him and said to him, Jacob, Jacob. So even Jacob had to do the feast, but he used old grain because there was no new grain in the land. But he celebrated it. He would not stop from celebrating the feast. Moshe, and Shavuot. Exodus 19:1 says, in the 3rd month. When is that? Sivan. After the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. And that's when they received the tablets of, of the law. First fruits in Shavuot, Numbers 28:26-27 says, also, on the day of the first fruits, when you present a new grain offering to the Lord in your feast of weeks, Shavuot, you shall have a holy assembly. You shall do no laborious work, but you shall offer a burnt offering, a soothing aroma to the Lord. 2 bulls, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs, 1 year old. And as the grain offerings, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for each bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs. They keep on going. Present them with drink offerings. They shall be without defect. 2 heifers, 2 nations. A ram, the sacrifice for atonement for those present at the time. 7 one-year-old lambs, 7,000 years, or millennia, or perhaps the 7 churches of Asia Minor. We don't know. Shavuot means 1 week. Shavuot means oath. That's why we do an oath in Shavuot. The root of the word Shavuot in biblical Hebrew is associated both with the sacred number 7, Sheva, as well as with the eternal sacred oath that is connected with the invocation of the name of God. The name of the Shavuot or Shavuot festival, means weeks or oath, is derived from the same root, shin bet, in the meaning of the testimony of covenants, referring to the system of covenants concluded on that day and to the testimony of those covenants. So it's double. But also derives from the other meanings of 7, referring to the sacred account of establishing weeks between the 2 harvest times. Therefore, Shavuot or Shavuot has the double meaning. So what happens on this day? It's the same thing. Here comes the nations. Acts 2:14, day of Pentecost, Shavuot. When the day of Shavuot had come, they were all together in one place. I wonder why they got together. Well, they got together probably because they knew it was the feast of Shavuot. And suddenly a noise like a violent rushing wind came from heaven, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting, and tongues that looked like fire appeared to them, distributing themselves, and a tongue rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with different tongues, as the Spirit was giving them the ability to speak out. From here, you can tell, and you can say, and you will know that this is called the Feast of Fertility. Why? Because this what opens up the coming of the nations and the growth of the nations into Israel, becoming all one nation. So what happens is it goes from the general, which is Noah, to the personal, which is Abraham, and it goes on the whole entire humanity until it gets to the progeny of Abraham. The covenant with Isaac only starts from the descendants of Abraham, that is, the sons of Jacob. The covenant with Jacob is limited to the tribe of Levi, which is consecrated to the priesthood. The beginning and end of the Jubilees have to do with the covenant made with Moses and Israel on Mount Sinai in the 3rd month, Sivan. The covenant is of a quite different nature, since it is reported from an angelic point of view. We cannot look at the scriptures and look at it like, it's just a sacrifice. No, it is not just a sacrifice. It is more than a sacrifice. It has meaning. Every single thing in the scripture has a meaning, has a shadow of something to come. So, associated with sanctity, associated with the subdivision of time, and associated with covenant and oath. Finally, it goes back to humanity with the new covenant in Yeshua. Now, I got only probably 2 or 3 more slides, but I would like to take you now to perhaps the future. Can we look at a future Shavuot, perhaps? How about Revelations, the final harvest of barley? It says, after this I saw, Revelation 7, 1-3. After this I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth. Why the 4 corners of the earth? I mean, is it 5 of the 4 corners of the earth? I mean, these people are in the 4 corners of the earth. So therefore, they are all over the place, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind will blow on the earth, or on the sea, or on a tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, holding the seal of the living God. And he called out with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, or the sea, or the trees, until we have sealed the bondservants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the seal, 144,000 from all the tribes of the sons of Israel. What is that? Barley. This is the barley harvest. In Revelations 14, we see them, the first fruits, redeemed for God and the Lamb. The Lamb was standing on Mount Sinai, with him 144,000, who had his name and the name of his father written on their foreheads. And then he goes on, they're singing a new song. And he says, they have been purchased from the earth. They're the ones who have not defiled themselves with women, for their celibate. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from mankind as first fruits to God and to the Lamb. These first fruits are a harvest of barley. And then we see also Revelation 7, the final wheat harvest. And it says, after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could count, from every nation and all the tribes, peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. And they cried out with a loud voice, saying, salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. So this is the final wheat harvest. What month? Sivan. What's going to happen? We got barley, and then we have wheat. Now, unfortunately, there is one more thing that grows with the wheat and with the barley. In Matthew 13, 24, 30, we see that Yeshua speaks about agriculturally, about one more thing that grows. And he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed seeds among the wheat and left. And when the wheat sprouted, talking about the wheat, and when the wheat sprouted and produced grain, then the weeds also became evident. And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seeds in your field? How then does it have weeds? And he said to them, An enemy has done this. The slave said to him, Do you want us then to go and gather them up? But he said, No. While you're gathering up the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. And at that time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, First gather up the weeds and binding in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barns. So you can see, he's speaking agriculturally. We have wheat, we have barley, and then we have weed. So which one are you? Think about it and pray about it. Maybe you are wheat, maybe you are barley, but you can also be weeds. Thank you. Have a good time and see you next.